Today we are talking about fire safety and how to make your church fire safe. We have three speakers today joining us from Apopka, Florida. I believe it's the Forest Lake Church. First is Bill Cochran, Adventist Risk Management Risk Control Specialist. Bill has a strong background in fire safety. In fact, the first time I met Bill, he was the Assistant Fire Chief of the Angwin Volunteer Fire Department. And Bill has over 35 years of experience in fire safety. Welcome, Bill. Also joining us.
Good morning, afternoon, good day.
There you are. Also joining us is Rhonda Harper. Rhonda is the Risk Management Director for the Florida Conference, overseeing the insurance policies and renewals. Prior to working with the Florida Conference, she worked for Adventist Risk Management, managing our Decatur, Georgia office. She also provides seminars and training for the Florida Conference employees and volunteers about insurance and loss prevention. Welcome, Rhonda.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Today, we are also very blessed to have a third speaker. Tom Emdy is the safety officer at the Forest Lake Church in Apopka, Florida. A retired migratory beekeeper, he and his wife Karen owned and operated Sweetbriar Honey Farms. Tom is very active in his home church, the Forest Lake Church there in Apopka, where he also serves as an elder and Sabbath school leader, and as I mentioned, leads out in the safety program as the safety officer, a position he has held for 5 years. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, David. Good to be here.
So I think it's time that I let you guys just get going, since I know we have a lot to cover. Over to you.
Thank you, David. Yes, there's much that can be said in the church safety program issues, fire safety, and one of the things is that many times fires we find are of course very devastating, and we don't feel they should happen in a church, but they do happen. Sometimes they totally destroy churches, taking everything with it, the building and such. Other times, perhaps just parts of the church. But during this webinar, we hope to provide you with an overview of what to do to make your church fire safe before there's an issue, how to be prepared, what to do for inspections, how to deal with prevention, and your fire emergency plan, which is also a very important part of fire safety. And very last, we will deal with a quick who to call and what steps you might take at the end if there is a fire, something to think about afterwards. We really want to talk about what can be done to prevent this from happening in your church and the issues that are related to that. Many times we feel that property losses, or which is what a fire loss is categorized as, is something that happens somewhere else. And certainly within the church worldwide, if we were to look at property losses during the years of 2008 through 2012, we would find that there were a total of 4,400 claims amounting to more than $83 million in that 4-year period of time. That's a little over $20 million a year in property losses. Now, not all of those in the local area. If we were to move that down to what we have as North American division only, of the 4,400 claims, 3,000 of those came out of North America with an amount of $67 million. Still a very large amount. But if we were to break that even further down, the number of fire claims, and this brings us to our subject today. How many claims of the 3,000? Only 141. That's just a mere 4.6%. Not much. There are many kinds of losses. We have losses from wind damage and frost and freezing and floods, tornadoes, hurricanes. There are quite an array of fires claims that have happened. But we're going to really look at fire claims throughout the rest of this presentation. If we were to even break this further down, that's the total number of fire claims within North American Division. But looking at church building fires, half of those claims came from church buildings. with half of the number, but only about $6.5 million in charges. That total overall breaks down to a little over $95,000 a claim, which is still a fair amount of money that's being paid out per fire and per claim. There are other costs involved in that. One of those items, Rhonda, tell us about deductibles.
Well, each conference has a set deductible that the local church is responsible for anytime there's a claim. Ours at the Florida Conference happens to be $2,500.
And of course, whenever there is a fire, there are other issues that come into that, not just the dollars. You can certainly come up with the insurance money to replace a building, but there are some real costs that are never covered. Those being things like relocation. If the sanctuary is damaged and you have to find another place to relocate for a while until it can be rebuilt or repaired, that's an inconvenience to everybody. You don't have the equipment any longer that you used to have. You have to perhaps go out and find another place to even print your bulletins because the photocopier is not working. So there are many costs that are not involved in this, but it is, as you can see, a large portion of the number of claims that we have. $6 million is still a large amount. One other interesting thing to look at was the number of claims by type. What caused those fire claims? And this will lead us into what kinds of things we can do to keep our churches fire safe. The most common cause is electrical. The next out of this statistics were arson, and then wildfires and poor housekeeping. And those numbers are not very large. We had 69 fires, but unfortunately 55 of them were left, the cause was left blank on the form, so we don't have a better information for you on those at this point. So it's important when you do have a fire, if you have a form to fill in, make sure you fill in all of it. Every piece is important, and it helps us as we look at other issues. If we were to look at those same claims, however, by dollar type, you can see that the 6 electrical fires caused a total of $1,800,000 in damages, a little over $300,000 per loss. That's significant. Arson came in at about $144,000 for each loss. You can't do much about somebody who's determined to create problems, but there are some issues that you can relate to and deal with. Poor housekeeping, $440,000 for 2 fires. This is another major area that is controllable. So the 2 main areas that we deal with are electrical and poor housekeeping. There's another set of statistics that we have that encompass the years 2006 through 2011. Of those claims during that year, there were 283 claims in the 5-year period relating to fires. And the sources, 34%, 1/3 of the total claims for that 5-year period, again, were electrical. 13% arson, and 13% poor housekeeping. Poor housekeeping is right up there. You've got to keep the place clean. There was a minor note that there's about 8% that was wildland fires, things that perhaps are beyond our control. But there are still issues relating to how to protect yourself and protect your church structure from a wildfire. The last thing I want to talk about real briefly is statistics is where did these things happen? We look across the North American division, and if we count the areas that had the most fires, most claims, there were 2 areas that turned in 6 claims apiece. And then there were 6 other areas that only had 4, which means the rest of the 283 came from other areas spread out far and wide. The 2 areas with the 6 is 12 fires and 4 more from The 6, another 24 fires. That's a total of 36 out of the 283. So fires can happen just about any time, any place, and to anyone.
I have a question for you, Bill.
Yes.
Our church is mostly concrete block and brick. I mean, how much of a fire hazard do we really have here?
Well, there are things to consider. Here's a good illustration of a church that is deemed to be unburnable because it was made from concrete block. But what about your roof, perhaps? Is the roof made of concrete? Not likely. You probably end up having wood decking on perhaps wood beams. One of the most common is to have laminated beams with wood decking. What about the internal walls? Are the walls made of concrete? Not always. Sometimes you have steel studs, but many times the wood studs with sheetrock. And the sheetrock is not to keep the fire from burning per se. It's to try to contain it and slow it down so that the fire department can get there in time to put it out. It's important that those areas be kept containable. What about the window trappings? Tom, does your area have curtains and blinds on the windows?
Yes, we do.
How about the pews?
Good point.
Good point. The pews are wood, certainly, most always wood, and covered with material. Furnishings, other furnishings such as the pulpit. What about the communion table or other things that are used within the sanctuary or the Sabbath school rooms? Are they all non-burnable? Not likely. The carpet itself. Other equipment. You bring in a piece of equipment and it can short circuit itself within itself and burn, create a fire. The plastic cases will melt and create quite a fire that makes real problems. And decorations. We like to decorate for the holidays. The holidays will be coming up soon, and that's an area that needs to be looked at. So we need to look at what we can do to make our church fire safe. First of all, one of the most important things is to make an individual responsible. When we have within the church structure the pastor and the elders and deacons, deaconesses, and others who serve in offices, they all have responsibilities that they're looking out for. But one area that we've been stressing a lot is the safety officer. Rhonda, you've done a lot in this area. Can you tell us a little more about it?
Sure, I'd be glad to. We've asked every location in Florida Conference to designate a safety officer. That person is actually the eyes for me at that location because I can't physically get to every location and do a safety inspection for them. That safety officer would have a safety committee that reports to the board, so when they find things that need to be taken care of, the board can deal with it effectively. And also we do annual training for our safety officers to help train them on their job responsibilities so that they can do their job better.
Yeah, another attribute that is good to look for is to find someone who has a real burden. As you said, someone who has a little bit of training in that area, but someone who's specifically looking at it. The custodian is probably not the best person to appoint as your safety officer. While he might be well knowledgeable about your facility, he also might tend to overlook some things that might need to be important. So it's important to have a safety officer who, as was said, reports to the board. But what do you do, Rhonda, if there isn't one appointed?
What we've done is if the church hasn't told us who the safety officer is, then we just assign it to the pastor and they receive the information and they're responsible until they tell us who the safety officer is going to be.
So you should find an individual within the church that has a burden that you can ask to help lead the congregation in the safety program. Next thing you need to do is to reduce and eliminate resources. You have to look around the facility, look at your church, and look at it critically. Is it completely fire safe? Do you keep materials that are flammable away from open flames and areas that can create problems? Do you overload your electrical system? We have some tools that you can use, and these are very helpful in trying to do the looking around, the inspection. You know, inspection sounds pretty intimidating, but it's really a very important thing to do, and it's important for the safety officer to do it because he looks at it differently than perhaps the pastor or the Sabbath school leader or the custodian might look at it. So it is very important, and we have tools that we can help you with as far as the inspection forms. And education. Once you have a safety officer, it's very important to educate the church as a whole, because this is not a job that can be done by one individual. It really is a team effort. And the safety officer needs to realize that he or she is simply leading in the approach to what they need to do. I want to talk a little bit at this point, a little more about the safety inspection form, rather. If you go to the Adventist Risk Management website, which is www.adventistrisk.org, not .com, .org, you will find when you get to that page, the home page looks like what is on the screen at the moment. And look for the prevention areas. There are a lot of things that can be done. There's suggestions and tools that you can use. One most important, and either of these, either the spot, the place across the top, or the spot across on the right-hand side of the page will take you to the prevention page. And you can look there at some old webinar presentations. You'll be able to see this one eventually. But you can click on the church key on the prevention page, and right underneath the picture you see the sign that says tools. That's the place to go, and you can find a copy of the church protection forms, church inspection. This should be done yearly, right, Rhonda?
Yes, we actually require our churches to fill it out annually and send me a copy of it. And this new form is available where they can just fill it in online. They could even email it to us instead of having to print it off like the old form and have to deal with all the paper.
A fillable form, that's something that would cut down on paper and is a good thing. If you're not comfortable with doing that, you can print it, fill it out, and then come back later and print it, fill it in on the computer later if you want a nice, neat form. And then you can set it aside, either save it as a form or print it. But you need to make it relevant to the church. The other thing is that this form does not deal only with fire safety. It is complete safety inspection, looking at things that cause trips and falls, other issues relating to safety other than fire. But it is a tool that I would highly recommend each of you use. It's available. You can go to the website, download it anytime you want, and use it, and we would recommend that heartily. It does need to be perhaps made specific to each church. You'll notice that there's a yes and no for certain questions and a non-applicable. If the item does not apply to your church, then you don't need to worry about it. But it's a suggestion of what's there. If you have some unusual situation, if you have more than one building, if you have an unusual place that is a little different, you might want to have a special place you can add to the form and make it relevant to what your church is and how you're dealing with it. I have one church that I know of where the custodian has taken part of the church form, which is inspection form, which is should be filled out annually, and he took part of it and made up for himself a list of all of the emergency exits, the fire extinguishers, and emergency lights. These things should be checked a lot more often than just once a year. So he made a list that he could give to himself, or use for himself, or use and give to the custodian, that kind of logically walked through the facility from one end to the other so that nothing would get missed, instead of having to run back and forth and check the doors in this location and then go back and check the fire extinguisher or fire alarms, emergency lights. All of those things need to be dealt with. So he had created a special list that he could use for that item. One thing, like I said, is that after you've finished with the form, it needs to be shared. And since the safety officer reports to the church board, that should be the place that this information should be shared with. It's not to point fingers at what's happening or create problems. It's to eliminate problems. And by letting people know what has been found and what areas need to be improved on, through that process, this tool will help you avoid problems and areas that you're needing to deal with. Specifically now, let's get into some specifics. What do we look for when we're using this form? As we mentioned, electrical problems seem to be the largest source of fires and the most costly fires that we've had in recent times. So is your electrical up to date? Are you trying to overload the system? When I do inspections within facilities, I can't say that I have ever found a single facility that didn't have some electrical cord problems somewhere along the line. Generally, most commonly, it's the small little electric cords that are so useful, extension cords, but we really call them little zip cords, lightweight cords that are really not usable for commercial use. One thing you have to remember is that the church facility is a commercial facility, and as such it needs to be dealt with on that basis. Electric cords, extension cords are only to be used on a temporary basis. And as the little picture here shows us, many times the electrical outlets are abused. If you don't have enough electric outlets in the right places, then you really need to have an electrician install more so they're in the right place at the right time. Electrical cords are perhaps one of the biggest problems. Old wiring, a lot of the churches are old and are not meeting the needs and requirements of today's equipment, especially in the office areas. Another area that we look at is the foyers and areas where decorations and such are done. Another area that to look for is flammable materials. So many times when we go into Sabbath school rooms, we find that the teachers have created very nice illustrations or props, but most of the time it is not they're not fire retardant materials. There are requirements that in schools where fire bulletin board materials and other such things be made out of fire retardant paper. Paper's a big thing. Tom, you've had a little bit of experience with paper issues.
Well, it might seem very obvious, Bill, but interestingly, early on when I was a safety officer at our church, I found paper to be more of an issue than I expected. It was stacked up on top of cabinets. There were cardboard boxes in the corners, things that you just do without thinking about. So I was surprised to find that.
Yeah, it's easy to put them aside. We talk about a 20% rule. What that means is that in a given room of the available wall space, now that doesn't count the windows and the doors, but of the available wall space, paper should not cover more than about 20% of the wall space. And it should be kept away from the doors, entrance and exit doors. The reason for that is if there happens to be a fire, the paper, of course, will burn much quicker, and if it's close to the doors, that creates a real problem for people trying to exit the room. Holiday decorations. You know, this is a big area where we many times take risks that are really not worth it. Candles are many times used at times when they really shouldn't be. It's nice to have them as decorations. You can use a candle as decoration, but you don't have to light it. If you're going to have a lit candle, you should have it in some sort of like glass container that would keep it from falling over and perhaps starting a fire somewhere. I had to shudder. That wasn't too long ago. I was at a church program, and the children were bringing up little angels and attaching them to a box that had been made to look somewhat similar to a castle. And in the top of this, there was a paper mache material that had covered the top, and then in the center was a candle. Now, it was a great thing to have the candle and look great, but I really got nervous when they decided to light the candle. Fortunately, nothing happened, but we take risks sometimes that we really shouldn't do. Holiday decorations, including trees, Christmas trees. Do you have your Christmas tree treated when you pick it up? You can have it fireproofed for a few dollars more. It always takes a little bit more money, but it's certainly worth making sure that your materials are fire retardant. Good housekeeping. We talked about good housekeeping a bit, and that creates some real problems when you open a closet door and you find it's somebody's cherished storeroom. That creates other issues when you fill the room, especially a mechanical room where the electrical outlets are there to be kept clear. You should have a clear space in front of the electric panels of a good 3 or 4 feet.
Yeah, though often when I'm out visiting a church or a facility and I am doing an inspection, I open the mechanical closet door to look, and it's being used as storage. So I recommend putting a sign on it that nobody is allowed to put any storage in there to keep it clear.
Yes. I saw one closet at one point. It had a gas water heater in it, and the secretary had decided to store all of the paper records for the students there because it was such a nice available dry spot. Not the thing to do. Not the thing to do. Other areas, kitchens. Are your kitchens equipped, fireside rooms, community halls, whatever you call them? Are they equipped with commercial equipment, or did we simply use some older residential equipment? Many times we don't think of the difference here, but it is important to look at what we're requiring of the equipment. Commercial equipment many times is made a little more durable, a little safer, has better safeguards than commercial equipment. Like we talked about as far as the extension cords are concerned, the little zip cords, little 2-wire electric cords, people like to use them at home for various things, but they're really not to be used elsewhere. And the same is true in the kitchens. It should be a commercial kitchen equipment as much as possible, Self-closing doors on hallways. Anytime you have a door that opens onto a hallway, the door should have a self-closer on it. This is a requirement from fire marshal. Many of our churches do not have regular inspections from fire marshals, but they should. They fall under the classification of a commercial building wherever there's a meeting place where there's room for more than 50 people in one place. The fire marshal does have control over and can create issues. Emergency lighting. Do you have lighting in your facility? If the electricity were to go off, if there were an electric fire and all electricity went off at night, would you be able to find your way around? Look for places that become dark hallways that need to be lit. Make sure your emergency lighting is installed and is working. Fire extinguishers. They're required. They should be available and in serviceable condition. You should make sure that you have a proper extinguisher for the area. In the kitchens, the fire retardant agent is different than what you would have in a hallway. Your local fire department is more than happy to help you with this kind of information if you simply ask. They'll come by and help guide you.
Bill, I have a question here.
Mm-hmm.
Our service company checks our fire extinguishers annually, but on the card there's a place for a check off each month. Who's the best person to do that inspection monthly?
Well, you remember I said that the safety officer needs to educate folks around him, and this is more of a team effort. The safety officer might choose to do that, but he might also ask others to do that. Many times the fire extinguishers are not checked at all. It's simple. All you're checking for is, one, to make sure that the tamper-proof seal has not been broken. You want to make sure that the indicator, there's an indicator on the side that says it's in working condition. Make sure that that's up and that it's hung and clean and ready to use. And the spot on the back is for anybody to initial. You could assign it to your deacons, for instance, and say, okay, the first of each month, if you see a fire extinguisher, look at the tag. If it hasn't been checked, check it and simply initial it for that month. Everybody can do it, but it should be done monthly. Furnishings. The one thing we talked about as far as furnishings are concerned relate to commercial versus residential again. The difference is commercial equipment has to be treated with a fire retardant kind of thing, of surface. Many times we bring in for the youth room couches and other chairs for the young people to sit in. They like to kind of lounge around a bit. And that's nice, but you need to make sure that the material has been treated with a fire retardant substance so that it's commercially rated and specific for your use in that area. Vandalism. You can't do much about vandalism, but you certainly don't want to invite it. You don't want to provide an area where you store boxes, for instance, outside your garbage area. You don't want to keep it close to the building. That's inviting somebody to simply start a fire and see what happens. Keep it clean. Keep your area clean. Keep the shrubbery around trimmed and properly taken care of so that you don't invite problems from vandalism. I want to talk a little bit at this point about fire prevention. I can't emphasize more the need for fire sprinkler systems. Most of our buildings are older buildings, and many of them do not have sprinkler systems in them, and that's understandable. But at some point or time, if the occasion arises, they should be retrofitted with sprinkler systems. It is a proven fact that if there is a fire sprinkler system can extinguish the fire and greatly reduce the costs and problems relating to a fire. Make sure that you have your fire extinguishers in working order, and make sure that you can, if need be, if those who want know how to operate them.
Yeah, Bill, I've come across a situation where when we're doing our safety officer training, a lot of them say they don't know how to use an extinguisher. So I always recommend you can invite somebody from the fire department or from your local extinguisher service company to come out, and they will put on an actual training and show people how to use an extinguisher.
Excellent suggestion, Rhonda. These folks are available and will help you anytime so that you can see what's happening and what to do. Fire prevention, other items, fire alarm systems. Many of our churches have intrusion alarms. Many of them have fire alarms, but many times they're not monitored by anyone. They simply ring a bell or create a problem, try to create confusion and noise, chase away somebody. But the fire alarm system should be available in every church facility. You should have a system that is monitored by an outside entity that is listening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whenever the alarm goes off, they're responsible for calling the fire department and also calling folks from the church to say, your alarm is sounding and you need to check on it and see what's happening, but we've already called the fire department. One of the biggest issues is that the deacon gets called in the middle of the night because the fire alarm is going off, and he goes down to check and finds that the church is already heavily involved in a fire. One of the earliest, or the earlier you can get the fire department alerted and on the scene, the less damage you're going to have. Feel free to ask for the fire department or your fire marshal to come and visit. Get to know them on a first name basis. You will find that they're very friendly and very helpful. As long as you're willing to ask the questions, they will help you with the solutions and problems that relate to your individual churches.
Bill, can I interject here?
Sure.
We have a question before you go on. It's really related to sprinkler systems. And
Okay.
One of our listeners is asking if you can explain the differences between wet and dry systems and the effectiveness of each.
Okay. Real briefly, the two types are, as you said, wet and dry, meaning that the pipes are either wet or dry. Keeping water in the system all of the time in the warmer climates is generally the way to install a sprinkler system. Dry systems are generally used in colder areas to try to avoid freezing and other problems relating to cold weather. A system that is wet, that has water in it all of the time, each sprinkler head will only go off when it is involved in a room where there is fire. That's one of the questions I get a lot of times. They say, well, what happens if we have a small fire in the closet? Is the sanctuary going to get wet? No. Each sprinkler head has a meltable link that allows it to let the water flow. And as long as there's no fire in the room, you're not going to have water coming out of that system. Wet systems are checked generally on a regular basis, and they have what they call a flow alarm in them as well. We talked about the alarm systems, but when the water starts flowing, it is detected and an alarm is sent to the fire department as well. So there's some real advantages in having a wet system. Dry system simply means that the pipe is dry until there's a fire. There's a valve that feeds the system, and when there is a fire, the fire alarm opens that valve and the water then flows into the system. The problem with dry systems many times is that the heads, sprinkler heads, do not have a fusible link in them, a heat link. They're all open, and so you can have more water damage from a dry system. I hope that answers the question. If not, folks can send us another question. I'll be more than happy to get back to them specifically.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Where are we?
I think we're at the Knox box.
A Knox box.
What is a Knox box?
What is a Knox box? A Knox box is a handy device. Not many people have heard about it. It's a bit of a specific name. Knox box is a company. If you go out on the web and you look up Knox box, you'll end up at the Knox box website. These are little boxes, secured boxes, that only the fire department can open. They keep the keys for it. They open it and close it, and the use of this is if there is a fire in your facility, they can open the Knox box, and inside you keep a set of keys for the facility, and that's why it is so secured. They can then use the keys to open the doors rather than having to break them down. It can save a lot of time. It can save a lot of expense. If there's a small fire, they don't have to wait around to try to break down the doors, and you don't have to repair them after they're finished. They come in a couple of styles and in many sizes depending upon the needs. There are flush-mounted boxes that fit right into the wall, and normally these are found near the front entrance of your facility, be it the church or a school or whatever. You want one Knox box per building, and you get these by asking the fire department to come down and help you with it. There's a surface mount variety as well if you don't want to embed it into the wall of the building. and those have an electrical connection, a multi-purpose electrical switch in them so that they can be connected to your tamper-proof, to your church alarm system, security system, so that if anybody tampers with the box, it will set off the alarm as well. So there are many things that are uses, but the biggest thing is that it's a reduction of costs because it allows the fire department to get in a lot quicker. They don't have to worry about trying to break things to get into the building. They can go through the doors they need to quickly, more efficiently, and it saves time and saves expenses. Emergency fire pre-plan. This is an important section of dealing with the fire prevention. This involves something, Tom, that you've done a lot of work with, and that's fire alarm and fire drills within the facility.
Yes, actually there are a couple of challenges we ran into early on when we started having the regular fire drills. And one pretty important one is where the children go if it's a service that you have Sabbath schools meeting. And so we've picked a place near the church where all children always go, and the parents know it, everyone knows it. Another thing that we've dealt with is when to have it during the service, at the end of the service. We've picked a time, different times, so that people learn how to handle different occasions.
You know, at the Florida conference, we've asked all of our churches to do a fire drill at least one time a year. The schools are required by law to do them so many during the school year, but there was no law for a church. So we've asked every church to do a fire drill at least one time a year as they put together their emergency plans.
Tom, do you think that this has been helpful for the church family to have fire drills? Seems to be a little disruptive, perhaps.
It's been very helpful, actually. The last time that we had the fire drill, we evacuated the building in less than 2 minutes. It's been a good training. It's been good training for our members, but also good training for deacons because they're such a major part of helping us get the building cleared.
You know, the fire emergency plan, pre-plan, is part of the emergency response plan. And when you look at the yearly inspection form, one of the questions is, do you have an emergency action plan? And this is part of it. And you want to include in this plan some of the responsibilities of what people should do, what the deacons perhaps should do. But avoid one pitfall, and that is naming an individual. Don't ask David to do something specific, because what if David's not there? You want to make your plan built around the people who are responsible, or people who positions. If you have the head deacon and he happens to be away, there's somebody who's serving in his position. He needs to understand that he is responsible for those things. Evacuation routes. Great thing to do is to plan out where people will go. You have the exits, hopefully on the building's evacuation site plans that are supposed to be posted in the various rooms. That simply tells people which exit to use, but they should know where to go. You should have a planned area for your Sabbath school rooms. Where are the little ones going to end up so that their parents know where to go to find them, rather than running all through the church trying to find where their children are.
Bill?
Yes?
If I can interject another question, I think it follows right up from your comments on the connecting parents and children. The question is regarding people with disabilities, physically challenged folks. What kind of preparations can be done for them?
The preparation is done in the fact that you end up practicing. There's no plan that was written the first time through that works perfectly. Everything has to be adjusted, right, Tom? You have to adjust things.
Absolutely.
So what you have to do, David, is find a way to accommodate those. Help people to understand that when the fire alarm goes off, that means they need to move. And if there's someone who is disabled or having a problem in front of them, be a little patient, help them, guide them as well, and everything will flow much smoother. And you will find that if you actually do practice, that this will come about from practicing.
Great, thank you. Another question from Carl is there a sample plan available that churches can build on?
Yes, there is. If you go back to the tools on our website, you will find a plan that can be adapted that has some suggestions. It needs to be made personalized. You need to make it fit your facility, but there is a plan there that's available, suggestions to get started, and it is a great resource. You want to make sure that this is important, and you want to make sure that it's reviewed at least yearly. It would be great if you could have a yearly fire drill. I don't know, in all of my years of attending church, there have not been too many that have had fire drills, but it is an important thing to do. Start off slow, if nothing else. At least sound the alarm so people know what the alarm sounds like. That's one place to start from and build from there. Review it yearly. Make sure that it's something that is an active piece that you can work with and move on. We need to wrap this up. We're running a little long. What if there is a fire? Notification of your local conference and insurance safety personnel. This is an important thing to do and many times overlooked. One thing to do when there has been a fire is to make sure that you let the folks know what has happened. What's your procedure in the conference here, Rhonda?
Well, after the event, they would probably call myself or one of the administrators at the office to let them know what had happened so that we can immediately get a hold of Adventist Risk Management, because they will want to get an adjuster out there quickly to evaluate the situation.
Okay. Another thing that is many times overlooked, and a piece that you should have in your emergency action plan, is who's going to talk to the press. Many times a side comment is made by somebody at the scene of an emergency, and that comment then is in the press, and somebody takes it out of context, and then there's all kinds of problems and issues. You want to make sure that you have someone identified to make those comments. Make sure that you have a person, and normally identified as your information officer, someone that you can call that will come down who will deal with talking to the press and such. That's an important thing. Be proactive. Make sure that you have done things ahead of time. Try to look at various aspects of your church. One thing we didn't talk about back under the flammable areas was the lawnmower that's used for cutting the grass, where you keep the lawnmower and the gas for that, those kinds of things. So there are many areas that we didn't touch today, and we apologize for not being able to get those items. But if you have other questions, feel free to send us a note or ask, and we'll try to do what we can. The website has a place where you can ask a question if you need.
Thank you so much, Bill, Rhonda, and Tom, for sharing with us today. If folks do have questions, now is a great time to type them in the question box. While you're doing that, let me just tell you a little bit about the next upcoming webinar. The next webinar in this series, the safety series, will be about winterizing your church. Have you ever had to deal with frozen pipes? Water damage from frozen pipes can cause serious damage to a church facility. This free webinar will focus on ways you can winterize your church facility and avoid these problems. And that webinar will take place October 8th at 2:30. That's October 8th at 2:30. So that's coming up fairly soon. Now, when we were discussing in our preparation with Rhonda and Bill and Tom, they're all in Florida, and their comment to me was, frozen pipes. Well, do we here in Florida need to participate in that webinar? And honestly, I think especially the South needs to participate in the webinar, because frozen pipes can come as a surprise, and does from time to time. Every few years, there's a cold snap in the South that really can cause a lot of damage. That kind of claim can really cause a lot of problems for your church. So you do want to take that seriously. And John Dugan will be presenting that and giving some practical advice about what you can do to prevent that from happening by winterizing your church effectively. So we do have some questions in here. So let's go back to questions. What recommendations do you have for the fire drills during church services? Pastors are often reluctant at times because they don't want to disrupt their service. What are your comments on that?
I got questioned that quite a bit when I sent the note out to all the churches asking that they each do a fire drill. They're like, Rhonda, is there a specific time? My comment was you can do it whenever you want. At the end of service is fine. You can tell them before the service begins that, once the service is over, we're going to have a fire drill, and that way everybody can clear out the building and then proceed to go to their car and go home. Tom, I know at the Forest Lake Church, you've had it at different times. Do you have a comment?
Well, we did kind of a soft approach. Initially, we had at the end of the service, people could just go home. But then we found, really, if you can empty the building in less than 2 minutes, the whole process doesn't take very long. And our pastor was very much in favor of having it before the sermon or during, and in a few minutes we're back in and we just proceed. So it was good practice to put it during the service.
You'll find that as you do practice, this procedure becomes much smoother and more efficient. The congregation has an idea of what they should do, and that makes it flow a lot better. So the practice is very important. It does take planning. You need to plan ahead and work with the pastoral staff. I'm sure that they will be more than happy to try to accommodate slipping this in on a Sabbath morning.
Great, thank you. One of our listeners, Clifford, makes a comment here. We conducted a fire drill after the end of service a couple of months ago. It took less than 2.5 minutes to empty the church and validate an all clear. And apparently the whole experience was well received. Great comment, thank you. Let me see, we do have a few questions going on here. One question here is, Bill, is it possible that you could speak just a little bit about the basic procedures of what to do in case of a fire? Just your core, okay, there's a fire, what do we do?
Well, the first thing you do is to notify the fire department. Call 911 and report it. Make sure someone is following up on that and make sure that the alarm has been sounded. A church that does not have a fire alarm needs to figure out a system for alerting the congregation. It is not good simply to try to run around from room to room letting people know that there is a fire in the building. There needs to be a fire alarm system, and the people need to know what it sounds like so that they can react appropriately. Moving away from the building, once you're outside, it's important to move away from the building so that the fire department can get in and do their work without being obstructed. Many times, the congregation will fill the parking lot or the driveway near the entrances near the facility, but make sure that they move away and leave an open path for the fire department and men to do their job.
Thank you very much. All right, so I think that wraps up the questions we have now. If you do think of a question that you'd like to ask later on, please go ahead and email them directly to me, dfournier@adventistrisk.org. That's DFOURNIER @adventistrisk.org. If you're looking for more safety resources, please visit our website, adventistrisk.org, where we have many resources available for you. And I hope you'll join us for this ongoing safety series of webinars. And also, please check out the recorded webinars that are available on our YouTube channel. Some people have asked when this recording will be available. And normally we get it up by about Friday. It needs to go through a conversion process, and that might take just a little bit of time. But we'll send an email out to everybody letting you know that it is up and where to find it. And I think what we're also going to do is we'll probably link the emergency plan that was referred to and the self-inspection form that Bill mentioned, we'll link it all together so you can have all the resources in one place rather than hunting around for it. We are trying to make that church safety page on our website more concise and easier to use all the time. But we'll make it really easy in an email for you this time. And with that, I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and really thank Bill and Rhonda and Tom for sharing your thoughts. We look forward to speaking with you next time.
Good. See you later.